While some know it as the beginning of the week, what Monday is also known for in our circles is that it is one of the days where Blizzard will release their weekly tuning passes or their patch notes and news around the additions into the game, either right after the weekend or before the weekend on a Friday. Now, why this Monday is curious is not because we are expecting any changes today, it's for next week. It's because we are now 1 week away for one of the two promised balance tuning passes that will come at the release of first the pre-season of the expansion with the release of the heroic and normal raid versions, and then the week after that, March the 24th, for the full season with Mythic Raid and Mythic Plus. And it is very likely that the announcement of the tuning of the changes planned for these times is gonna come on Monday. So now that you have had almost a week to play around with your characters, to check around even in your Mythic 0 dungeons with other specs and whatnot, and also, by the way, as for example the beta of Midnight has still kept going on, you can still right now pop on the beta and join, Mythic Plus dungeons, for example, in the beta with a full max level gear character, etc, etc. It's time to go back to what Blizzard said they were planning to do. They said they were going to be observing what goes down in this first week to launch the first set of tuning, and then the second set of tuning will be launched as they observe less so the second week of Mythic 0 clears and more so the raids that will be done next week. So our goal for today is observing what has been shown to us. For example, just to name one, in the specs that have been performing well, perhaps even too well compared to others, as well as the complete opposite, the specs that seem to be by and large underperforming compared to others, to try to get an idea of what is Blizzard planning to do in a week from now, or announce in a week from now, next Monday, on the balance tuning changes for the specs. Because we do have a couple of things to go by right now. For example, while we're still missing a dozen or so specs from the simulations, we already do have an idea of quite a lot of the specs and their supposed expected performance by the time the full expansion releases. For example, unless Blizzard decides to do the exact opposite, we do know that Unholy Death Knight, no preference, whether it is Rider or Sun Lane, is bound to be nerfed in the realm of 30%. For the very simple fact that right now, based on sims, they are in the realm of 30% ahead of the other clump of average specs. So unless Blizzard does the opposite, which is buffing all the other specs by 30%, then the more simple solution would seem that easily the largest of the nerfs that we plan to see next week is the one going for Unholy, which will be followed by the one of Demo Warlock. You could also go the other way, expecting some of the specs to be buffed, the ones that are performing the worst. Right now, Arms Warrior, for example, is being beaten in DPS by Guardian Druid. It has almost exactly half the simulated DPS as an Unholy DK. 100% less damage. Now, considering Blizzard has said in the past that they consider a balanced state of specs if the gap from the best of the best and the bottom of the bottom is no more than 10%, so a 10% damage gap between top and bottom, 100% seems to a bit too big of a gap at the moment. So while DK gets nerfed by 30%, we would also have to see some 30+% buff to Arms Warrior. To give an idea, at the moment the break point, the benchmark for these max item level and tier set specs to reach the target DPS. The target good DPS, to not be made fun of for being weak, is 100,000 DPS. It's a nice round number, okay? If you reach 6 tuple digits in your sims, you are fine. You're not gonna be bullied and made fun of because your damage is too low. So the outliers right now, the ones on the weekend being Arms, Affliction, Assassination, Arcane Mage, Fury Warrior, Feral Druid, Enhancement Shaman, and the outliers towards the top being Unholy, Devour, Devastation, Frost Mage, and Elemental. Even though we don't have fully released the sims, we do have some ideas of the ones that are missing, that are still likely, for example, going to be doing worse, in the case of Shadow Priest, for example, and their abysmal single target damage should be, but also Balance Druid would be down there. When it comes to the top side of things, Demo Warlock is also expected to be doing very well, with all the other specs even the ones missing, floating somewhere in the middle. So when it comes to single target, when it comes to what we expect from the raid, that is what we would be thinking about. Many of the specs in the middle shouldn't be expecting buffs, you know, some of the ones hoping to get some bumps up, don't really have a reason to, at the very least at the moment. I guess you could hope in some kind of Blizzard's preference or misreading of the situation where they still decide to end up, you know, buffing Destro Warlock by 5% or something, even if Destro right now in single target is doing fine. That is what you can gauge when it comes to single target by looking at the simulations. When it comes to AoE, you can either try to gauge or take something seriously from Mythic0 or by the simultaneously running Mythic Plus groups in the beta, which is still up and running. Now, the beta has kept the same meta for the past few weeks, ever since more and more players started moving towards Unholy DK, which we had an entire video about, as well as Brewmaster Monk as the tank of choice. We mentioned how, for example, as you started going high up towards the high level keys in the beta, you had more Brewmaster Monk than 30% of all of the other tanks combined, for example, and this is still true right now in the beta. So if you were to start to be looking at culprits, at potential targets for being weakened when it comes to Mythic Plus focused power levels, you have more or less the same targets you have had up until a couple of weeks ago. When it comes to DPS, we're still talking about Unholy, Demo, Devour, Augmentation, and Arcane Mage as the specs of choice. When it comes to tanks, it's Brewmaster Monk, and when it comes to healers, it's Restoration Druid. Those are the ones that are more likely to be up for another round of nerfs before the pre-season launches. Now, for Mythic Plus, there is a larger chance at way more specs being buffed in their AoE damage or even their healing or their tankiness, since with single target you are sort of getting by looking at sims of only the DPS. When you start looking at the broader picture of Mythic Plus with tanks and healers included, obviously Resto Druid is very, very popular. It is followed by Holy Paladin, and then there is, you know, the complete abandonment of specs like Discipline Priest, of Holy Priest, Preservation Evoker. So those could be targeted by Mythic Plus focused buff way more easily without impacting too much the specs either, because they still wouldn't immediately jump to being very good, even with pretty sizable buffs. Same goes for tanks. At the moment, the abandonment in Mythic Plus of tank specs like Prot Warrior and like Blood DK, as well as DPS specs like Arms, which is in the similar situation as their current terrible single target damage, but also Assassination, Feral, Affliction, Windwalker, Marksmanship are targets that could be seeing buffs when it comes to their Mythic Plus power. We will see what will Blizzard be deciding based on what they claimed in their statement, right? Because when you read that, as per their words, their tuning adjustment, the next planned pass is expected to arrive with the Season 1 launch on March the 17th, there wouldn't be too much data to bank on, besides what we mentioned, besides the existence of simulations and the currently running Mythic Plus keys in the beta. If they even want to take Mythic0 results seriously that happened in this week. What will happen next week obviously will be more raid focused, because players already had a pretty easy time doing Mythic0 now. Next week they will have an even higher gear. Mythic0 will be even easier. What will be more relevant for them to check is the raid performance, so there will be more of a focus on the single target damage and the single target power, and few, you know, cleave targeting that could happen in the raid as opposed to Mythic Plus situations. We will see what will ultimately be their MO, but for now that's what we can expect, purely based on the performance of these specs up to now, as well as the predicted performance up to now using simulations, on what will be Blizzard's decisions on the tuning come next week. That is what we have for now, for today on this Monday. The reminder that we are about 7 days away from Blizzard announcing what do they plan to be tuning for specs at the release of the next reset on March the 17th. We will see how close these predictions will be once the tuning comes, but for today, At the beginning of this week and close to the first weekly reset of the season, it is now time to leave each other. We're starting our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who have been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, I guess we are getting close to spring. We have these days, you know, it seems almost springtime up until 4 to 5 p.m. and then suddenly the weather realizes it's still winter and goes back to being freezing cold.